It's hard to imagine how many pieces of glass, each unique in shape and color, bound together yet separate, can, under inspired hands, become an image that illuminates and inspires for generations. Much like the stained glass windows that have become a symbol of people united in their beliefs, First English Lutheran Church is a long-standing, enduring family. This family continues a journey that began just after the turn of the century. A small congregation then known as Grace English Lutheran Church gathered at the Women's Club building that still stands today at Madison and Fayette Streets. The congregation moved twice, initially purchasing Christ Episcopal Church and then moving services to the Grand Army of the Republic building before dedicating the church at 5th and State in March of 1916.
Well, a lot of things have changed. I mean, even in the confirmation, we used to have to memorize Psalms and Bible verses. But, of course, that was all in German for me. Yes, all of that stuff was German, you know. And although, I could get the gist of it, I'm so happy for the English.
See, I was born in 1914, and they didn't have a church, but they were using the DAR Hall down on Hamilton Street that's still there. That was where we had church, and that's where I was baptized, in that building.
Daddy took all of us girls on the streetcar, and we got off where the old post office used to be, and we walked every single Sunday to 5th and State. Mom never went because she stayed home and she made our big Sunday dinner.
Family didn't have a car. You walked. And that was quite a ways from where we lived, but so was everybody else doing the same thing. Of course, those way out would take a streetcar down there.
In its first 40 years, First English was led and nurtured by 5 pastors: Charles Raymond, W.F. Hurtle, Paul Brito, Walter Ruth, and Ernest H. Engel. Near the end of World War II, the congregation began a victory bond campaign to finance relocation of the church.
But I had remembered before I was married, this was all open land, and when the war came along, we all had victory gardens out here, and I walked around on this ground an awful lot, planting and bringing out water.
We somehow decided to get together and purchase this land where we are now. And in order to make the payments on it, divided up part of the land and sold it off as lots.
I remember Sunday school down at First English in the basement on 5th and State. And we were at that time contemplating moving. So I can remember marching around this wooden church, dropping our pennies in, and that was going towards the building fund of the church.
And they used to run a food tent at the Heart of Illinois Fair. And there was a story told about one summer when they were out there doing that, and they had a big old stove. I mean, it was, that's all they really had to cook with. Microwaves weren't even a figment of anyone's imagination yet. And a huge storm came through, like tornado-like storm. And the skies got darker and darker, more threatening. The wind was picking up, the rain was picking up. They were very, very fearful of what was going to happen. One of the ladies of the church took the cash box and put it in the oven to keep it safe, because she figured if everything else blew down, the money at least would still be safe.
I grew up in a home that they didn't call them crafters then, but my mother made monkey dolls out of men's work socks, and clowns out of little scraps of material that were sewn into circles with elastic in the center. And they made rickrack earrings, and they took yarn and made lampshades by stringing the yarn around the lampshades. And it was just, there was always something going on for the bizarre.
We made wreaths around Christmas time, their Christmas wreaths, in the parsonage basement, and then we sold them.
The first building was a one-room Sunday school building on the corner of Forest Hill and Wisconsin. Just south of that building, a temporary wooden chapel was built by the men of the church. The First English family began services in what was known as the Barracks in October of 1948 with Reverend Don R. Bachman.
But anyway, we started over there. Pastor Langholz got us a room over at Von Steuben, and we started our Sunday school over there. And then when they built that little shack, then that was our Sunday school room. And in the wintertime, we'd have to go early because we'd have to light the stove, and we'd have to turn on the lights so the mice would run under so the kids wouldn't see them.
Well, it was long, like a barracks from an army. I think that's probably what it was.
That was my job when we had a meeting or something, was to throw the coal in the hopper.
Of course, we had what we called the barracks before we moved in here. And I played the organ over there for 3 years.
If we'd have a little worship service, we'd do that, and then everybody would help stack the chairs over to the side, and then we'd have our activities or whatever fun event we were going to have. It was one all-purpose room, so the chairs went up and down many times in the course of a month.
At our first meeting, they had to elect the building chairman. And Bob Brown, who was on the advisory committee, he nominated me, and then Ralph Anderson, which was on the building committee, he seconded it, and they closed the nominations right there. So I didn't even have a chance to say yes or no.
I remember when they decided to build this church, and I can remember Mom and I walking over here, and it was amazing because all of the men of the church were in that sanctuary, and they were working at their trade. I mean, it could be Larry Krieger working with the sheet metal for the furnace, or Bob Brown putting in some wood for the carpentry. And these guys worked all day and would come at night, and they'd work and work. And you know what? They had fun at it.
It was really amazing that the people would get together like that and work, because we'd have 50 people here working all the time.
Pastor Langholz would get up on the scaffolding, and people that were here would pass up those cement blocks up to the top so that it could be used the next day.
And it was so crowded I couldn't see because I was really young, couldn't see over the adults. And Uncle Paul was outside, and I was trying to get, closer, and he says, "Hey, I got a place for you." And he took me inside the church, lifted me up on the scaffolding, and I could look out through the window and see the whole thing. And he said, "Now don't move until I come back and get you." Dad knew he probably had a fit, but at least I got to see the setting of the cornerstone. So that was kind of a neat day.
Yeah, it was a wonderful feeling because it was just the fulfillment of all we've been working for,
No, I think everybody just got a little souvenir. Yeah. A little cornerstone. I think he's got a date on it or something. I'll have to look that up.
All these needles on these pews, a bunch of us guys made all those down in this basement.
You become a part of it a lot more when you put the work into it. It means a lot more to you.
The dedication of the new church took place in September of 1953, led by Reverend Waldemar C. Langholz. In more recent years, the church has been led by 3 pastors, Marvin Gohl, Warren Freiheit, and James Lillie, each bringing new strengths to our congregation.
And I think that as we go on, we'll look back and see that each of the pastors that we've had brought their separate gifts.
And when Reverend Gall came, I was asked to do his costuming and his makeup for the Lenten dramas, because I am a theater major.
And the first year we did that, we had to have 2 Lenten services, 2 nights. The church was full both nights.
And I can just remember sitting up, and this was, of course, before the front of the church was remodeled, where the pulpit cast a much more looming presence across the congregation when he would preach for a minute. He had this very deep, booming voice, and we'd sit up in front, and I'd look up there as a kid thinking, oh, I'm in trouble.
And I saw the first English group at their table, and I thought, well, I'll go over there and say hi and tell them I'm really looking forward to working with them. And in the process of coming back down the row, then it was Pastor Freiheit, who was going to be our bishop. Some years, or I guess the next year after that, he had a glass of water sitting there, and I proceeded to knock it over, all over his handouts, into his lap, and he very graciously, said, "Oh, that's okay," and laughed.
Well, at that time we had Pastor Zaya here, loved Barb to death, and she had offered to drive, and I'm just kind of a control freak type person, and I don't let other people drive. And, so we're rolling down this hill, and there's no place to pull over. And I just kind of leaned back and I said, "Kids, put your seatbelts on." And all of a sudden the van got real quiet and all you heard was the clicking of the seatbelts. And I kind of leaned over and I said, "Pastor," I said, "your turn to drive." And she says, "I'll let you drive, I'll pray."
But the one that really was a surprise is when Pastor Freiheit arrived here. He was 38 and he kept telling us about being 39. And we did. We surprised him on his 40th birthday, and he came and he opened up the gym door. And here was almost 200 people there, and hollered surprise at him.
A couple asked if I could meet with them in my office on a Friday night, and I met with them and came out of my office, and they said, "I want to see something in the gymnasium." We opened the doors of the gymnasium, and it was filled wall to wall with people there to celebrate my 40th birthday. Blew me out of the water.
One of our young boys here at the congregation got himself an alb, and he shaved his head, and he dressed up, and he went around, and he pretended he was Pastor Lillie, and he went around trick-or-treating as Pastor Lillie.
Well, I've been on the worship committee on and off for many years. It's just one of my great loves. I really like being a part of the worship committee. There's so many parts to it to try and present a worship service that people will want to come to worship their God.
This church started being an English-speaking congregation. You talk about traditional worship and go back and think about the liturgies we use. They were written in the 60s and 70s, and some of them in the 80s and 90s. And, traditional, what is traditional?
Worship to me is not about me, and it's really not about the congregation. It's really about God.
The continuity that comes to the Lutheran Church that's carried through it with the hymn book, the service we've got, is something that joins us all together.
I now say to friends, I say, I don't know who goes to the first and second service because I go to the 11 o'clock contemporary. But for me, it's good. It seems to serve people of a variety of ages. There are children, there are middle-aged people, there are elderly, and I think we each come for our own reasons. I know it doesn't suit everybody, but that's why we have a variety. We have a choice of different types of service, different hours of the day, and a different format. And for me, it's just I've told friends as I walk out with the songs that we sing, as I walk out of that service, I feel happy. Even if my day isn't great, the music is happy music, and it's very uplifting.
The contemporary part is built into the liturgy, and it goes into the entire service, and that makes it a lot more meaningful. Very uplifting. I think personally, when I leave with a little more hop in my step.
The contemporary service would be yet a fifth liturgical service. The only difference is in the traditional you use an organ. In the contemporary you're using guitar, but it's the same basic liturgical format. And I'm not sure some folks have figured that out yet.
There's a splendid Lutheran tradition of music. Martin Luther was a gifted musician and sang a lot and played the lute, and how can you not love music when we have composers like Bach as part of our musical heritage? And
you wait 2 years to get your organ, okay? And we were a year and
and 5 months from having our organ installed, and the organ company burned to the ground with a big part of our organ in it. So it was kind of like God saying, patience.
There was that sadness, of course, when the organ burned and we had to wait another year. And during that year, a faithful servant and marvelous saint of the church passed from this life. But still to this day, as I see the W at the front when I enter, I'm so reminded of Julia Witzig, the W for Witzig, and the input that she had in preparing and organizing and following through was inspirational to me at the time and continues to be inspirational as I look back.
And I had one particular job that personally I'm proud of. I wired most of that organ out there.
We have a good choir here, some good, what I call the diehards. They're there every week, no matter what we sing. They don't like question what it is. They just come in there and they raise their voices and sing, and it's a lot of fun.
So much of the handbell choir it's just such a beautiful form of expression that so many people just don't know. And for me, it's just been a great way to worship God in a totally different way.
An awesome addition. We've actually had a praise band going back a number of years, but just in the last year and a half, we had 2 young couples that were very talented musically, a great guitarist, a great vocalist, a pianist, and a bass player that really are the core of that praise band. They brought in a young man who's an excellent drummer, and we just love playing.
Well, I'm in the praise band right now. I sing with them, and I started one week when we were trying to get me in for a song and stuff, and I just asked them if I could sing with them for that practice, and then that pretty much started me doing the whole gig.
And said they were looking for something special for the anniversary and had kind of worked things out, went down to the basement and started typing. And it more or less wrote itself.
One of the things that's been really rewarding is I try to make sure that my choir music and the scripture lessons of the day meld, because I want my kids to understand what they're singing about.
You know, the last 20 years has been a wonderful explosion of music, contemporary Christian music, and I think we're still struggling with that. Where are we going to go? How are we going to incorporate that but still keep the traditional?
We was cooking for the Salvation Army, their board members, and we were fixing chicken, but everybody was doing cooking there and everybody didn't know what they was doing. So we had fried chicken and it was all over with, and Leona and I was cleaning the kitchen, and I said to her, you know, I thought I put paprika on that chicken, but it was chili powder.
And Pastor Langholtz headed it up. This must have been one of his real loves. And then the men served the dinner, cooked it, and the women came. It was candlelight and even little glasses of tomato juice. It was served beautifully. I'd never seen anything like it with the men's organization, and no women were involved in the preparation as far as I know.
Mom must have been making a casserole or something, and she needed brown breadcrumbs. And this lady let them burn. And she's like, how could anybody burn breadcrumbs?
I remember Pastor Langholtz was going to, I forget what his specialty was, but he liked to cook. And everybody was here, and he burnt all the rice. And they had to run out and get more and cook it real quick.
They asked me to help out with the youth, and I didn't have any idea that the youth had anything to do with the kitchen. So right after I got elected youth council member, they had to do the Lenten meals. So the youth did all the Lenten meals. So we helped cook in there, and then right after Lent is Easter breakfast. And I guess that was my claim to fame, is when we made the Easter breakfast, because I've heard people say before that the breakfasts in the past have been quite interesting, where they start with runny eggs and then they cook off and they become hard as they go, and then they were glad they didn't have scrambled eggs. And
one year, not too long ago, Jody George decided that she would share our cookie walk. Well, let me tell you, mountains, hundreds of dozens of cookies this woman bakes. We ran out of freezer space. We had to borrow freezer space. We were just like, oh my word.
And so when it was my turn, instead of that, so nothing was handy there, and so I would pile the cups, all the communion cups, in a box and take them home and do them, and then we'd bring them back and set them.
I've met a lot of people through the kitchen, and that in itself has been fun. That has broadened my horizons with the people here in church, and so that I know them quicker than I would have if I just been going on Sunday mornings.
One recipe in particular comes from a former pastor, Pastor Langholz, and he had a recipe for a Thousand Island dressing. And I've heard about this recipe for years and years, and I guess it's been in every cookbook we've ever made, and so it definitely had to go in this cookbook too, because it wouldn't be a cookbook without his salad dressings. So there's been a lot of the old-time feel in the congregation because of all the potlucks and dinners we've had, bringing people together. So it's been a fun year.
The women that I can remember who have served this church in so many different ways are just, I think, a big part of why this church is the way it is. And I couldn't even begin to name the number of women who impacted my life from their faith and their dedication and their service to this congregation. So,
I was in a circle, and I am still in a circle, and that is one of my absolute favorite parts of First English, are the women in my circle.
When I joined 18 years ago, that's one of the things I loved about this church, was the fact that there were women in leadership positions within the church.
But it's the support of these dear friends, and we're just there for each other. If there's an illness, there's prayers offered and meals brought in, and so it's just something I would never want to give up here.
I come to Young at Heart, which is the senior group, on Thursdays. There were 4 of us played pinochle, and we used to have a hilarious time.
I love working with seniors. I just like working with them, and they're very cooperative and just a fun group.
So there's like 27 people praying during the course of the day. They just each take a half an hour, and I prepare a devotion and a list of things for which to pray, and people come to the sanctuary and they're in there all by themselves. It's kind of an awesome experience, and they pray for the things on the list or their own personal needs.
I was drafted into, I can't say I volunteered, I was drafted into leading the country store, and I did, with completely inaccurate memories of how it really had been as a child, which may have been maybe been just as well. But I had a wonderful committee.
It was fun for me to hear, like I said before, the music, but it was just fun every area of it. But I thought this was a good opportunity for me to bring people. I was bringing the music in, and to bring people who don't usually do a lot in the church, or maybe the people don't know they have this talent, and so that they could share their talent in the church. I really liked that.
And I started envisioning how this tutoring program could run with people from our church. Here I can remember a boy named Jason. He showed up at his first session in September, and he'd been tutored the year before, and he just came flying across the room and grabbed his tutor around the waist and hugged for all he was worth. And this was a boy who was so disturbed and so many problems in school that he was in a special school, Guardian Angel. And we kept him, and he and his tutor just made wonderful strides together.
And I responded to Mary Nimi's request for a tutor for the tutoring program. I'm a high school English teacher. I was ill and not working any longer, but I thought, hey, I ought to be able to come to church for an hour and a half every Thursday afternoon. And it was Mary's smile that kept making me come back to church.
Yeah, she rides the mower and I run that weed whacker around. And it is a job. It takes at least 4 to 6 hours a week, or longer sometimes.
Anybody, you ask something to do something here, they say yes. You want it done yesterday or tomorrow, okay? And that is what really happens here.
It started with a telephone call because I had a vision of presenting a program here for Christmas. And I wanted to borrow some of his dad's art. And he said, "What do you want to borrow it for?" And wound up with the whole collection.
Looking back on his Christmas cards and where they were never really sold and they were always given, that the church is probably the ideal place to have them.
Brought a bit of history, and this is my great-grandfather's baptismal robe, and he wore it in 1893, and as you can see, it's a little smaller for a baby's robe. He was a premature, so it's a little smaller. But as we passed the robe down through the family, not all the kids, like myself, were as small. When they put it on me, apparently they couldn't button it all the way up. So we had to leave it open because I wasn't quite as small. But not only me, but pretty much every other kid in my family was also baptized in this. My little brother was baptized in this, and so were my cousins.
And so one of the girls, not me, was kneeling at the altar and her garter snapped and her hose started rolling down her leg. And of course the girls were all just giggling at this really serious, solemn occasion. And that's probably my primary memory of confirmation. But
From what I've
I
heard.
don't know. Dad hasn't told us a lot about confirmation.
He's told me a little bit. I mean, it's different. They didn't watch quite as many movies. They just
Did they
talked
have
more.
movies back then?
I don't know. I don't know if they had them in the 1700s.
When my kids were in Bible school, there was a little puppy came to Bible school one day, and nobody wanted him. I remember Pastor Gall wouldn't let his kids have her, and so we took her home and advertised Lost and Found and the Pet Patrol and stuff. Nobody came, so we kept her for, we named her Lady, and we kept her for 10 years when she went to dog heaven. And I never got another dog.
We can do arts and crafts, and sometimes we get to watch movies about Christ and how to worship him. What do you do, Lydia?
We just make things too.
I guess you really just start out with a basic idea. This year we wanted, they had just real relaxed, it appeals to the kids. And I think the adults in the congregation like the change. At first it's like, oh gosh, we don't know what's going on. After a couple years of it and we introduced kind of similar songs, similar sounds, they're like, yeah, this is cool. This is a youth service. This is what we do.
And it's a way for the youth to give back something to the church, and so that the elders also know what the kids are doing, because you don't always see what they're doing. I mean, we go out and do a lot of things. We've adopted 2 firehouses, and we're doing flowers for them. We made stepping stones for them. The kids made stepping stones for here. They got to get them outside still. And they do a lot of things that the congregation doesn't see. And
Rob graduates from seminary in 3 weeks and is going into the ordained ministry. And so we're
very proud of
him.
Yes. And it all has to do with, his relationship with God that he formed here.
Working with the young people of the congregation, whether it through Sunday school, vacation Bible school, youth group, is an absolute blessing and an opportunity that I feel God that has given me a gift.
I remember one time, it was in technically 1999, but it was New Year's Eve, and we were having a candlelight service. And I was younger, so of course I had a bedtime and I was very tired. So I fell asleep in the pews and I snored very, very loudly.
I'd like to see in the future more priorities being changed, because I see a lot of, there's a lot of competition out there with soccer and baseball and basketball and whatnot. And A lot of people don't realize that less than 1% of those children will ever be professional athletes, but on the other hand, 100% of those children are going to meet Jesus. And so I think, to see parents prioritizing that over some of the mainstream basketball, soccer things is necessary, I think, to get to where we want to go.
Because some parents, like one of my friends, her parents aren't very supportive of what she does. But having parents that are supportive of what you do and actually get in there and do it with you, it works. It's really cool.
We're looking to the future and how we can be servant leaders in our community, but the vision is always propelled by our faith in Christ. That never changes. Christ, and only Christ. Christ always comes down to us. Christ comes to us in hope. Christ gives us the courage to face the future. Christ moves us into tomorrow.
The Peoria is a community that I think is it's a wonderful city, but it's in dire need of faith in certain parts of the community. And we're well positioned by virtue of our location, by virtue of our history, by virtue of our resources to meet the needs of those communities. Now, we may not know what those answers are and what the community needs, but I guess the way I've been thinking about this is I want us to take leaps as a congregation and try things we've never tried before. And we're going to miss, and we're going to do things that don't work. But I want us to miss boldly and not miss badly.
I don't think the mission of the church ever changes. The mission is to share Jesus Christ. And that mission never changes. Now, attitudes, I think, change over the years. In addition, expectations that people have, those change, but the mission never changes. I just happen to believe the Bible is as up to date as tomorrow's newspaper.
I've been in favor of staying this location. I still think it's a very good location. It's centrally located I think the fact that a new zoo will be started will help improve and stabilize the neighborhood. And also from a selfish point of view, we don't want to drive 20 minutes north to go to church.
And a chance for, as is the church, and a chance for great times. I've been working on the new zoo. I think those things are going to just catch people by surprise. They don't realize how this area is going to become much more vibrant, an area that families want to come back and live. I think that the resurgence, the inflow is back into the city. And I think that if we are there, with the type of facilities that people want to come back to, or want to live here, not even come back, but want to live in the area, we're going to be in the right spot. I'm very bullish on Peoria and very bullish on this area. So, I think it's a great future.
We need to have springs in our hearts and springs in our legs. We cannot sit.
Lydia, do you hope anything?
I hope that they would make more songs for the kids to learn.
I bet they will.
My special wish is that we could sometime hire an African American or Hispanic staff member.
We don't have enough youth anymore. I remember a time when if a kid cried, everybody turned around and kind of scowling at him. Now I'd be tickled to hear a kid crying. I want to hear babies crying. I want that. I want to hear youth.
But I also see at First English people who stay with the pace of what's changing and what needs to be changed to be effective and be prophetic in the communities where they serve. I am very pleased that Pastor Lillie is the pastor at First English presently. I sense that he has a hand on the pulse of the church. I think he has a hand on the pulse of the community. And leadership at First English that has the ability to make the changes necessary to meet the needs of that community, but at the same time recognizing its participation in the wider church.
You look at a Tilly at 102, still sharing her life, and you look at the brand new babies that we've baptized this year that are so precious and so wonderful. And to see all of those people standing in front of that same rose window and knowing that, my grandfather's hands touched those pieces when they were being built. And my children, and hopefully someday their children, are standing in front of that same window, understanding all of that. And that history doesn't change, and it doesn't get written down and put on a shelf and put aside. History becomes part of everything that we are and everything that we give to the next generation.
During the tenure of, say, Pastor Langholtz, the vision was build the facility. During the tenure of Marvin Gall, it was grow the numbers. During my tenure, it's going to be the servant church. Let the servant church arise for the community. And not necessarily for our sake, but for the sake of the community, for the sake of others.